Have you ever had one of those moments where someone asks you, "Are you okay?" And you instantly reply, "Yeah, I'm fine," even though you know that's not the whole truth? Maybe your mind is racing. Maybe something happened at work, with friends, or in your family. Something that's been quietly sitting in your chest all day. But instead of talking about it, you keep it inside. You change the subject. You smile. You move on. And here's the interesting part. From the outside, people often assume things about people like this. They might think you're emotionally distant, or that you don't trust others, or maybe that you just don't care enough to open up. But psychology tells a very different story, because people who keep their problems private are often not cold or disconnected at all. In fact, many of them feel things very deeply. Their minds just process emotions in a different way. Let me show you what's really happening inside the mind of someone who keeps their struggles to themselves. Imagine this situation. You're watching a movie with friends. Something stressful happened earlier that day. Maybe an argument, maybe financial pressure, maybe a mistake you can't stop replaying in your head. Everyone around you is laughing at the movie, and you laugh too. On the outside, everything looks normal. But inside, your brain is doing something else entirely. It's analyzing, replaying, trying to solve the problem quietly in the background. This is actually a very common psychological pattern. Many people develop what psychologists sometimes call internal processing. Instead of expressing emotions outwardly, the brain turns inward. It treats problems like puzzles that need to be solved privately before they are shared. Think of it like a computer running background programs. Even when the screen looks calm, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. And interestingly, this tendency often develops early in life. For some people, growing up meant learning that sharing problems didn't always lead to understanding. Maybe when they tried to open up, they were told things like, "Don't be dramatic," or "Just deal with it." So the brain adapts. It starts thinking, "Okay, if sharing doesn't help, I'll figure things out myself." And over time, that becomes the default setting. But here's the twist most people don't realize. Keeping problems private isn't always about distrust. Sometimes it's about protection. Imagine you're carrying something heavy emotionally. When you talk about it, you're not just releasing the weight, you're also placing part of that weight on the person listening. Some people are extremely aware of this. Their empathy is so strong that they hesitate to share problems because they don't want to burden others. Their brain quietly asks a question many people never think about. Why should someone else have to carry this too? So instead, they hold it. They carry it themselves. Another fascinating reason behind this behavior has to do with identity. For many people who keep problems private, there's an internal image they try to maintain. Maybe they see themselves as the calm one, the reliable one, the strong one in their family or friend group. You've probably seen someone like this before, the person everyone goes to for advice, the one who listens to everyone else's problems, the one who always seems composed. But here's the paradox. When you're the strong one, it becomes harder to show weakness. Your brain almost feels like revealing your struggles might change how people see you. So instead of risking that shift, you keep the storm inside. And here's something even more interesting. Research in psychology suggests that people who process emotions internally often develop incredibly complex inner worlds. They think deeply, reflect constantly, replay conversations in their minds. You know that moment after an argument when you suddenly think of the perfect thing you should have said? For these people, that mental replay happens all the time. Their brain is like a quiet laboratory, constantly running experiments on thoughts, memories, and emotions. Sometimes that can be exhausting. But sometimes it's also where incredible insight comes from. Many writers, artists, thinkers, and innovators throughout history were known for being intensely private about their personal struggles. Their minds were always observing, analyzing, and reflecting beneath the surface. Of course, there's another side to this pattern too. Keeping problems private can sometimes create an invisible pressure. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater. At first, it's easy, but the longer you hold it down, the more force it takes to keep it there. Emotions work in a similar way. The brain can suppress feelings for a while, but if there's never a release, the pressure builds. That's why people who keep everything inside sometimes surprise others when they finally open up. Friends might say things like, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" But from the inside, it didn't feel that simple. Because for someone used to handling things alone, sharing problems can feel strangely unfamiliar. It's like trying to speak a language you understand but rarely use. There's also a fascinating neurological element to all of this. Studies on emotional regulation show that some people naturally rely more on internal regulation strategies. Their brain activates regions associated with reflection and cognitive control rather than outward expression. In simple terms, instead of releasing emotions through conversation, their brain tries to organize and manage those emotions internally. It's a bit like cleaning your room by quietly putting things back in place rather than dumping everything out first. Neither method is inherently wrong. They're just different styles of emotional processing. But here's where things get really interesting. People who keep problems private often become incredibly skilled at reading others, because when you spend a lot of time observing your own emotions, you start noticing subtle emotional signals in other people too. A slight change in tone, a pause in someone's voice, the moment someone says, "I'm fine," but clearly isn't. They recognize it instantly because they've said those exact words themselves. And this creates a strange dynamic. The person who rarely talks about their own struggles often becomes the person everyone else feels comfortable opening up to. They become the safe listener, the quiet supporter, the one who understands without needing many explanations. But if you're someone who keeps problems private, here's something important to remember. Handling things on your own can be a strength. It shows resilience, emotional independence, deep reflection. But strength doesn't mean isolation. Even the most self-reliant minds sometimes need another perspective. Not because they can't solve their problems, but because sometimes another mind helps us see angles we couldn't see alone. Think about it like climbing a mountain. You might be perfectly capable of reaching the top by yourself, but having someone beside you can make the path clearer, the weight lighter, and the journey less exhausting. And interestingly, when people who keep their struggles private do finally share something meaningful, those conversations tend to be incredibly honest. There's no small talk, no surface-level venting. When they open up, they go straight to the truth, because they've already spent so much time thinking about it. So if you're someone who keeps things to yourself, there's nothing strange about the way your brain works. Your brain simply prefers to process emotions quietly before expressing them. But every once in a while, letting someone into that inner world can be surprisingly powerful. Not because you have to, but because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is realize you don't have to carry everything alone. And if this topic made you pause for a second and think about your own habits, or maybe someone you know who always says, "I'm fine," a little too quickly, then you might just have discovered something fascinating about the human mind. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones thinking the most, and the problems we keep private often say more about our strength, empathy, and depth than we realize.